And we picked a man that in our eyes fit this perfect description. Didn't want to have anything to do with God, didn't respect his laws, didn't respect his rules, didn't respect anything about him. He had just long hair, kind of beard and stuff, druggy, probably ex-biker or something like that. So we decided that we had to prove our allegiance to Satan. And to do that, we had to break the 10 Commandments. When I was 13, I went to Falls Creek, which is a Baptist youth camp here in Oklahoma, and she knew that I was interested in the stuff, so she got her in touch with me. I said, "What's the first thing I have to do?" And she said, "Praise."
Number 5. Sean Sellers. 40 years after Leonard Shockley's demise, Sean Sellers was put to his end for multiple slayings committed at age 16. Sellers, a former Satan worshiper who used to drink his own blood during satanic rituals, slaughtered a convenience store clerk simply to see what it felt like.
We're completely and totally evil and completely and totally devoted to Satan. He had just long hair, kind of beard and stuff, druggy, probably ex-biker or something like that, Let's prove our allegiance to Satan, And we picked a man that in our eyes fit this perfect description. And it says that you should choose people who by their actions basically beg to be killed. So we decided that we had to prove our allegiance to Satan. And to do that, we had to break the 10 Commandments. And we did a ritual one night and we started talking about it. And we decided, okay, let's do it, one by one, all of them. And that would prove that we were totally against God and didn't want to have anything to do with God, didn't respect his laws, didn't respect his rules, didn't respect anything about him, like that. And we decided that was it. Who won't be missed, who have no one. The Satanic Bible has a chapter in it called On the Choice of a Human Sacrifice.
6 months later, Sellers, dressed only in black underwear, shot his parents as they slept. This would be the crime that landed the 16-year-old on the row, sparking an international outcry for clemency. Media outlets from England, France, Germany, and more arrived in Oklahoma to report on the fatal punishment, while high-profile figures such as Archbishop Emeritus Desmond Tutu of South Africa pleaded for leniency. The opposition asked the courts to spare Sellers' life due to his young age at the time of the slayings, and a psychiatrist's diagnosis that Sellers had multiple personality disorders. Nonetheless, all arguments fell on the governor's deaf ears. After dining on Chinese food as his last meal, Sellers, the now born-again Christian, was fatally punished by lethal injection on February 4, 1999.
She told me how to do it. She told me how to set things up, She gave me this incantation to say, and everything. Just make her love me, That's all I asked for. I'll be good if you make her love me. I was trying to make a deal with her. Then, as I got 13, I got involved in Dungeons and Dragons. I was having some problems with a girlfriend, my first girlfriend, It was an experience that I'll never forget. I laid down, saw a church, I'd think of her and it would hurt and I'd cry sometimes. And when I was 13, I went to Falls Creek, which is a Baptist youth camp here in Oklahoma, and she knew that I was interested in the stuff, so she got her in touch with me. I said, "What's the first thing I have to do?" "Pray to the devil." No, not yet. I met a girl and she introduced me to a witch. She heard this witch give a speech at her school, and I liked that power, that power of being in control. And I blamed God. I got mad at God. Didn't want to have anything to do with him. Every time and when I did it, it was like something that I had seen in all these movies that I was so interested in. There were some Encyclopedia Witchcraft or something like that. I remember some pictures out of it and a couple other books, Crush, Puppy Love, all that stuff. I was praying, Lord, and I began to pray to Satan as she told me to. I had to renounce God. Dungeons and Dragons led me into witchcraft, which led me into Satanism. Okay, so it took me a few days to really get to where I wanted to make that initial step. And that was cool to me because it was like, yes, you can use your imagination with God. And whenever she broke up with me and told me that she didn't want to have anything to do with me, she said, "Praise to Satan." And I thought, I'm getting mad. And so I began to really kind of hate God, lash out at him in anger. But I was Dungeon Master in 2 of them, and then I played a 10th level fighter in the 3rd one.
Number 4. Stephen Judy. Terry Lee Chastain started her workday on April 28, 1979, with her normal routine of taking her 3 young children to their babysitter's house. Along the way, Chastain had car trouble. The single mom pulled to the side of the road and readily accepted help from a man who she thought was simply being a good Samaritan. Stephen Judy was anything but a good Samaritan. After fixing her tire but disabling her car, Judy offered Chasteen and her children a ride. Within an hour, Terry and her children were destroyed. Judy savagely ravished and choked Chasteen and threw her 3 children into White Lick Creek near Mooresville. The children, Misty Ann, 5, Steve, 4, and Mark, 2, drowned. Judy, 17 years old at the time of the incident, was tried in Martinsville in January 1980 and initially maintained his innocence. He later confessed and was sentenced to the electric chair. Stephen T. Judy was executed on March 9, 1981. He ordered prime rib and lobster for his last meal. His final words before punishment were, "I don't hold no grudges. This is my doing. Sorry it happened." State penalty laws were overturned by the U.S. Supreme Court in 1972. Many states, including Indiana, passed new laws that met the criteria outlined by the High Court. Indiana's fatal penalty was reinstated in 1977, and Judy was the first to go to the electric chair after that. Number 3. Charles Rumbaugh. Much of Charles Rumbaugh's short life was spent in reform schools, jails, and mental institutions. Rumbaugh committed his first robbery at the age of 6, when, with the help of his older brother, he broke into a building in San Angelo. By age 12, Rumbaugh had graduated to armed robbery. He used a tire iron to rob a gas station and escaped from the scene on a stolen bicycle. At 17 years old, Rumbaugh shot and destroyed a jewelry store owner, Michael Fiorello, during a robbery. In prison, Rumbaugh would claim that he was forced to shoot Fiorello. He said, "I would run in and stick a gun in someone's face and say, 'Give me your money,' and they'd give me their money. Finally, someone called my bluff." He made $54 from the robbery. Rumbaugh was fatally punished by lethal injection on September 11, 1985, despite protests from Amnesty International, who argued that the fatal punishment of someone who was a minor at the time of the crime would violate international agreements. Rumbaugh spent his final hours on the row visiting with friends and relatives, and was, by all accounts, in relatively good spirits. His mother, who had planned to see Rumbaugh prior to his demise, ultimately chose not to visit. Rumbaugh's final meal was a single flour tortilla. Number 2. J. Pinkerton. J. Kelly Pinkerton, convicted of the mutilation slaying of one woman and the slaying of another, said goodbye to his father and was fatally punished by injection, 9 months after escaping the same fate by just 26 minutes. Pinkerton, 24 years at the time of his demise, was pronounced deceased at 12:25 a.m., just hours after federal judges rejected an appeal hand-delivered by Pinkerton's mother. His father, Gene, the only relative to witness the punishment, gripped an aluminum rail in the chamber a few feet from his son. "Be strong for me," Pinkerton told his father. "I want you to know that I'm at peace with myself and with my God. I talked to everybody on the phone. I got to talk to Mom. Say goodbye to Mom. Keep your spirits up for me." Pinkerton, an apprentice meat cutter, was punished for physically exploiting and mutilating Sarah Dawn Lawrence in 1979 during a burglary of her Amarillo home when he was 17 years old. Mrs. Lawrence, 30, was knifed more than 50 times and her throat was slashed.
He was very good burger. He mainly used no force, unlocked doors, open windows.
And he was known for his criminal activity of entering houses unlawfully.
Stealing stuff. He was a pervert. He was a sex offender.
At the time J. Kelly Pinkerton reached the age of 17, he was known to the Amarillo Police Department.
Burglaries was not property. It was sexual gratification.
And had just been released from the Texas Youth Council, TYC. He'd try to go in and get as close to you as he could.
If you were working the midnight shift on the southwest side, then you would have probably been
14, 15-year-old kid, window peeking.
He clearly was on a path of having...
He had had numerous burglaries.
Pinkerton was also convicted of the 1980 slaying of Sherry Welch, 25, of Amarillo, who was knifed while working in a furniture store. Even before the final appeals were rejected, Governor Mark White announced he would not halt the punishment, calling the slayings two of the most brutal and heinous crimes imaginable. Number 1. George Stinney Jr. From the Green Hill Church, it is a few minutes' walk, across a plowed field littered with corn husks, to the shallow ditch in the woods where the bodies of two girls, Betty June Binnicker, 11, and Mary Emma Thames, 7, were found, side by side in 1944. Their slayings stunned the townspeople, many of whom had taken part in a search for them the day before. The girls had been gathering flowers when they were followed, attacked, and beaten so severely that their skulls were fractured. The bodies of the girls, both white, were found on the black side of town. Suspicion quickly fell on a 14-year-old black boy named George Stinney Jr., who, it emerged, had seen the girls the previous day. Police said that Stinney confessed to the crimes, and although there was no physical evidence. About a month after the girls' passing, George Stinney Jr.'s trial began at Clarendon County Courthouse. Court-appointed attorney Charles Plowden did little to nothing to defend his client. The only piece of true evidence against him was his alleged confession. Following a deliberation that took less than 10 minutes, the all-white jury found Stinney guilty of slaying with no recommendation for mercy. On April 24, 1944, the 14-year-old was sentenced to his end by electrocution. On June 16, 1944, George Stinney Jr. walked into the chamber at the South Carolina State Penitentiary in Columbia with a Bible tucked under his arm. Weighing in at just 95 pounds, he was dressed in a loose-fitting striped jumpsuit. Strapped into an adult-size electric chair, he was so small that the state electrician struggled to adjust an electrode to his right leg. A mask that was too big for him was placed over his face. An assistant captain asked Stinney if he had any last words. Stinney replied, "No, sir." The prison doctor prodded, "You don't want to say anything about what you did?" Again, Stinney replied, "No, sir." That's all for today's video. We'll see you next time.